Good afternoon, and welcome to Movies You Missed. I am your host, Jace Cudlin, and this is the part 3, the finale of sorts, of our Happy Halloweens, as I've come to call it to myself, mini-series that we did for the month of October here, where we cover Halloweens 4, 5, and 6. That's Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, respectively released in 1988, 1989, and 1995. And, we all watch scary movies in the month of October and the beginning of fall to get prepared for Halloween. And I'm actually recording this, and hopefully going to be able to release it later today, because I'm going to do non-stop editing and updating and releasing and recording all day today to get all these out to you, because I've had a very, very hectic, unpredictable recording schedule. Even though I had a set schedule, like I mentioned last time, it all went to shit immediately, because we were trying to get things lined up with our special guest that we had for the first one, and having to do that and waiting just kind of threw everything out of whack. So you're going to get all 3 episodes today, later today, on what is October 31st, Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. But yeah, so we all watch scary movies during this month, or at least, I think most people do. I watch horror movies all year long, but feel especially justified and kind of better about it and less shame about it in the month of October. So I thought I'll do something to bridge the gap between seasons, a little special treat. You know how sitcoms always had like a Halloween or a Christmas episode. These are our Halloween or Christmas episodes. I'll probably do something like this every year, I guess, but this was the first year that I was really on top of it. So here we are, and I thought what better movies to do than some movies in the Halloween franchise, because we're celebrating Halloween after all. And I thought, I could do 4, one for each week of October, or I can just do, what would I have done? Halloween 4, 5, 6, and then Resurrection. I just think to do the mini Thorn Trilogy within the Halloween series would make the most sense. And I definitely want to cover Resurrection. Don't get it twisted, but I will do that at a later date, most likely for a sequel summer part 2, or maybe just like next year on Halloween I'll release like, oh hey, we're doing Halloween Resurrection and Halloween 3, because why not. Sorry, I just ate I was eating chips right before I started recording there. Stuck in my teeth. Say what you will about like corn on the cob. I think potato chips are something that gets especially stuck in my teeth for whatever reason. Like I can never get them out once they're in there. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, today we're covering Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, the 6th installment in the franchise. And I think by far, even today, one of the most batshit crazy bananas installments. Definitely one of the most insane movies I've ever seen. And even reading about it and researching it for this episode has left me with more questions than answers. And even though I've seen this particular installment countless times, I still am no closer to being able to figure it out. And I think that's due to the troubled production that I will discuss later. And just that being lost to the ages, and people like actors, producers, directors involved kind of disavowing the movie and washing their hands of it and vowing to never speak of it again. So I don't know if we'll ever really know what a perfect Halloween 6 would look like. And believe me, this movie is far from perfect. But it definitely has, especially this theatrical cut, which I wanted to cover because I thought it was the most easily accessible to you, the masses, and then also to myself because I own it on VHS. Even though I've heard that the producer's cut, which there is a producer's separate cut of this movie with additional scenes, that's apparently more towards the original script as it was written on the page. But that version I've never seen. Even though after reading about it, I'm definitely going to watch it very soon, because it definitely sounds, and for all intents and purposes, is considered better. But yeah, again, like I was saying, this picture is very flawed. But all of them are flawed. I think every movie ever made is kind of flawed, in, to varying degrees. And I definitely don't think this movie is any less flawed than Halloween 5, but I think its flaws are a lot more fun, and it's a lot less frustrating to watch. And I definitely respected the fact that they were taking big, meaty swings, and adding a lot to the Michael Myers Halloween mythos and mythology and canon that I think is very fun, and that I, until several years ago, learned that they retconned these with Halloween H2O, thought that was like gospel, and it was what I considered Halloween to be, and these were irrefutable facts, indisputable. And I mean, this is still my headcanon. If we're talking about the Halloween timelines, sorry, my dad is using just a saw, I guess, in the backyard, and then there's someone with a motorcycle. What an idiot. I'm sorry. But yes, in terms of Halloween, the Halloween franchise, there's a lot of ways we can look at it. I think we've already discussed this, but just to reiterate, I mean, there's either Halloween 2, Halloween 4, 5, and 6. That is one trajectory, one timeline for the Halloween movies. And then there's Halloween 2, Halloween H2O, and Resurrection. That's another one. Because Halloween H2O, I think, released 3 years after this movie, retconned 4, 5, and 6, and followed Jamie Lee Curtis, who returned to the franchise directly after Halloween 2. So it followed her story. Whereas 4, 5, and 6 followed Jamie Lloyd, Laurie Strode's daughter, and her offspring, and new additional characters that rose up around her and Loomis. Whereas H2O and Resurrection did not have Loomis, because he had unfortunately passed away. Unfortunately, he passed away actually during the production of this film. This film is dedicated to him. And then, of course, there's the Rob Zombie Halloweens 1 and 2. And then there's the Halloween, 40 years later, David Gordon Green series, which just finished off earlier this month, which is Halloween 2018. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, so it ignores the events of Halloween 2, and then every other sequel, even the ones that had Jamie Lee Curtis, H2O, and Resurrection. But this Halloween 2, Halloween 4, 5, and 6 is the trajectory that I personally prefer. Because, I mean, like, Halloween 2, we know it's my baby, nearest and dearest to my heart, aside from the original. And, like, Halloween 4 is terrific, too. So I can't not have those. Whereas H2O, I can take or leave. And Resurrection I do like, but not as much as I like 2 and 4. And 5 and 6, of course, both have some great stuff, too. 6 being actually the first Halloween movie I ever saw growing up. Halloween 4, 5, and 6 especially, I've seen countless times. Couldn't even possibly tell you how many times I've viewed these movies, because they're always on AMC a million times during the month of October. And they're just fun. And they're, more than any of the movies, what I associate and what I know Michael Myers to be. Even though, of course, the original is a far superior film, and even Halloween 2, I think, is superior to these. I didn't see those in their entirety until I was like a teenager, young adult. So this is my preferred timeline, and is why I am discussing it here today. And again, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers it's just downright batty. I mean, if you've seen it, you know. The theatrical cut especially is what best way to describe Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers? It's nonsensical. That word comes to mind. Just illogical. Sometimes boring. Abrupt. But also warm and cozy. And fuzzy and grungy. Silly. Definitely bloody. Goopy, because there's like a green slime that comes in at the end that's unexplained. Gross, but also interesting, thought-provoking, intriguing, even. And short. It's a very short film. It's only like 86 minutes long. But yeah, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it later. But it's just a very, very interesting film, and I'm beyond ecstatic to talk about it with you today. And I'll be honest with you, I know I won't have time today because of all the editing and things I have to do to get these episodes out to you before the end of October tonight. If I didn't have all this to do, I would be watching Halloween 6, the producer's cut right now. Just because I'm very intrigued. And we'll talk about the producer's cut later. But if you can get your hands on it, because it is readily available, I think, on like Amazon, and also if you wanted to rent it on Amazon through Prime Video, I believe it's on there as well now. So I just want to get my hands on it, and I recommend that you do too. Maybe watch them both, compare. I think that'll be an interesting experiment for me to do. And again, yes, this is our final episode of the Halloween specials, the Happy Halloweens season, which has been such just a blast, fun time. I enjoyed making it so much, and we got to have another guest on, and we got to talk about some movies that I love and will watch over and over and over again. I think within a calendar year, like I said, or maybe I haven't said, I can't remember at this point. I've watched within a calendar year. I've watched the Halloween series all the way through 3 times. Because I started it like last Halloween into November. I did it once over the summer, and now here I am doing it again. Just enjoyable. There's so much fun, and I think there's there's a lot of nostalgia and happy childhood memories associated, like watching it with my family and my brother. And just they were always on TV, and every time they were, I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch this again. It's fun. This kill's coming. Oh yeah, awesome. Okay, sweet, there it is. Okay, but yeah, it's just watching them on like AMC Fear Fest, which I think still goes on actually, even though I definitely don't have cable and don't even know a single person who does anymore. I think that's still something they do, where they just marathon horror movies, which I think is very cool, very fun tradition that they do. Definitely helped bring to attention and expose me, a sheltered kid, to horror. I think if I had to be honest with you, I mean, my mom also really likes horror too. She's a huge horror hound, but I think getting to watch them on AMC really expanded my vocabulary and kind of cemented my love for them at a very, very early, perhaps too early age. Well, I don't even know what the hell the point I was making was, but okay, yeah, no, it was just this mini season has been a blast. Every episode I do is. I mean, there's nothing better than getting to talk about the movies you love, and I don't think any of us really get to do that as much as we would like. I mean, like, you know, if the people that you're around haven't seen the movie, then they won't really want to talk about it as much as you would like them to talk about it. So that's exactly why I do this. And I hope that, like, you maybe get this sort of platform yourself, or maybe you have the people around you that would like to talk about this stuff with you, because I think getting to talk about these kind of movies that you love is just the most fun thing in the world. I'm not tearing up, by the way. That was a burp. But anyway, last bit of business. We will return, and I don't know when. I might wait till after Thanksgiving, or I might dive into it right away. Is the official season, I guess, season 4, season 3. I don't know if I'm going to count this one or not. Which is the erotic thrillers. There's going to be, I think, 10 or 12 episodes in that, and that's going to go all through the winter. I've got that mapped out. and that's gonna be a blast. I know I'm gonna enjoy that very much. I very much enjoyed like the '90s, late '80s, early 2000s aesthetic in which those movies, I mean, they were made in that time, and you can certainly, it shows through in the way they're shot and the fashion and just, I mean, and like all these big name actors are in these movies that have these like bonkers, silly scripts, and these are movies that they don't really make anymore, because they don't think they really worked on like a fundamental level. I mean, just like I think it was like a genre of movie that kind of I don't know, alienated women of the time and was just like kind of a weird pervy thing for men to watch and enjoy. And then like maybe women enjoyed them too. I guess I shouldn't paint with a broad brush like that, but it's just like, I don't know, I don't think it was a subgenre of movies that was very easily accessible to like everyone around. So I think it kind of came and went, but I enjoy them very much because the actors in them are doing a lot, and just the way they look is so beautiful. And they're just like, it's like provocative but also harmless. Anyway, we can again, I don't want to talk too much about it because this is about Halloween. This is about the Curse of Michael Myers. But that season is coming, and it'll be coming sooner than you think, sooner than I think probably. And I'm very excited for that. And it'll be a blast. Yeah, I keep saying things are a blast, but it's because they are. So that'll be enjoyable, and that'll be within the next month or two. We'll be back. So I'm just saying, you won't have to go without hearing my voice for a very long time. And we got some guests lined up for that too. So just letting you know what you can expect going forward. And then after this erotic thriller winter season, I'll do maybe like a small spring thing, and then we'll go right back into sequel summer. And God, that's so enjoyable too. And I know that just ended, but it kind of almost feels like a long time ago already, and I yearn for those times again, because God, did I enjoy that so much. But again, let's focus up. Let's get centered. We're here to talk about Halloween, the Curse of Michael Myers, which of course it's Halloween 6, but I don't think the numeral 6 or like the actual number is used in the titles at all, officially on the screen. So I'm just going to refer to it as Halloween, the Curse of Michael Myers. It's an American slasher film released in 1995, the 6th film in the Halloween franchise, and the final film within the Thorn Trilogy kind of subset of movies within the Halloween franchise. It is the last film to feature the character of Jamie Lloyd. It is the last film to star Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis. And the film follows Dr. Loomis and a now adult Tommy Doyle as they seek to protect the baby of Jamie Lloyd and a new family of Strodes who have moved into the Myers house from Michael and the mysterious Cult of Thorn, led by the Man in Black from Halloween 5. And Tommy Doyle, of course, being the young boy that Laurie Strode was babysitting in 1978. So we see him all grown up in this movie, played by Paul Rudd. And Paul Rudd's film debut, actually, because this was actually filmed and would release before Clueless. So this was Paul Rudd's first big acting gig. He's actually credited as Paul Stephen Rudd, which I think is very interesting. I guess he dropped the Stephen pretty soon after. But yeah, he plays the same character that I don't want to say I want to say Philip Baker Hall, but I know that's not right. Anthony Michael Hall portrays in Halloween Kills. So it's a grown-up version of the young boy that Laurie Strode was babysitting, like I said, in the original Halloween. So he and Loomis team up to protect Jamie Lloyd's baby, and then also protect a new group of Strodes. This is Laurie Strode's adopted uncle and cousins who have moved into the Myers house. And again, that's a lot. See, that's what you're in store for here. There's a lot going on in this movie. Almost, some would say, too much. Because there's Strodes, they're in the Myers house, Tommy Doyle is back, Pleasance is here, Jamie Lloyd is in this movie, her baby. The Strodes have the Strode family has a young boy. Dr. Terrence Wynn is in this movie, who had a brief speaking role in the original Halloween. He's back, but recast. Jamie Lloyd has also been recast with J.C. Brandy. And we'll get into why Daniel Harris did not return for this movie later. But yeah, it's certainly, this movie strove to bridge the gap between Halloween 4 and 5, but while also honoring the story started in Halloween 1978 and Halloween 2. So, they're taking a lot of huge swings while also trying to connect all of those movies, while also trying to undertake the difficult task of explaining why Michael Myers does what he does and who he is and his indestructible force of evil kind of nature. And that's in 86 minutes, and if you take out credits, it's 84. So anyway, this movie was released on September 29th, 1995, by Dimension Films and Trancas International, the first film in the series to be produced by Dimension Films, which is the genre kind of sub-branch of Miramax Films, which is the Weinsteins. The Weinsteins were, as much as they are reviled now in our society, they were integral in the making of this movie, as well as, of course, a lot of other movies from the 90s and 2000s. But then this is the first film that they would produce, and they would go on to produce Halloween H2O and then also Halloween Resurrection. But yeah, this movie grossed $15.1 million on a budget of $5 million. So not a huge box office success, but it made its money back. And I think it also definitely made more money than Halloween 5. This movie was directed by Joe Chapelle, who was kind of a Miramax guy. He did this movie basically. He wasn't their first choice or maybe even their second or third choice, but he did this movie in order to secure a 3-year deal with Miramax. And he directed Hellraiser 4 Bloodlines, which I've never seen. And he also directed a Dean Koontz adaptation of called Phantoms, which is, I think, actually probably the worst movie I've ever seen in my whole life. It's truly terrible, starring Rose McGowan and Liev Schreiber and Ben Affleck and Peter O'Toole. But get this, still awful. And based off of a book that I've actually read that's pretty good, but somehow translated to screen turns into the biggest pile of dog shit I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, Joe Chapelle directed those 2 movies, which are both bad, I think. And he actually is uncredited on Hellraiser 4 because I think he came in to do a lot of reshoots and then received kind of directing credit in a way when the original director saw the final project and walked away from the film. And I believe Kevin Yeager, I think was his name, the original director of Hellraiser 4 Bloodlines, who I think stepped away from the project and disowned it and didn't want his name on it, saying that they had meddled with it too much in post-production. But anyway, sorry, Joe Chapelle would go later and would go on to, he would write and direct in television and executive produce. He worked extensively on Fringe and The Wire and a bunch of other TV shows. So he had his own career. And this movie was written by Daniel Farrands, which there's an interview with Farrands in the Taking Shape book by Dustin McNeil and Travis Mullins that I would highly recommend that you read. I will be, I'll touch on some interesting facts from the interview, but I won't go over too much of it because, again, I think you should just check it out for yourself. But Daniel Farrands actually would write and direct Crystal Lake Memories and Never Sleep Again, which are 2 documentaries that I really, really enjoy. One is about the making of the Friday the 13th movies, and one is about the making of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So very, very interesting. Farrands is obviously a horror fan, and he would this was the first screenplay he ever wrote. And he would actually go on to write and direct a bunch of movies. Most recently, The Haunting of Sharon Tate, which was a movie that Lizzie McGuire was in, where she played Sharon Tate, I think, and it was about her murder at the hands of the Manson family, which I heard was pretty well received, and I'm very interested to check out. But yeah, so this movie stars Donald Pleasance, Paul Rudd, Marianne Hagen as Kara Strode, Mitch Ryan, who was in Lethal Weapon, Darmon Gregg in Dark Shadows, as Terrence Wynn, and then features George P. Wilbur returning as Michael Myers for the first time. Like I've said in the past, because George P. Wilbur played Michael Myers in Halloween 4, and we see him returning again in this one. The music is again by Alan Howarth, who has scored all three movies that we've talked about so far in this Halloween. All three Halloween movies we've talked about on this show. So as far as the critical reception, or just the general reception of this movie, IMDb gives this movie a 4.7 out of 10. Rotten Tomato gives it a 9%, abysmal. But then Google users again give it an 82. So Google users are always more my vibe, I think. More my speed. They're a little less critical and a little more generous. Runtime, like I said, is at 86 minutes. And how did I watch this movie? I actually watched this movie via Shudder. Via my Shudder subscription. But again, I think you can just rent it on Prime Video, or your local library. I do have it on VHS. And why would you maybe have missed this movie? I think for the same reason you might have missed all these movies, is that, and especially this one, because the reviews are particularly abysmal. Especially when you hear about a movie that has such a troubled production. I mean, most people think, oh, there's no way that can be good. And especially having to follow Halloween 5, whereas with 4, maybe you saw it, and 4 is obviously the best of these and the most sound filmmaking, I think. And maybe you see 4, so then you liked 4, you see 5, but no one saw 5 and was just can't wait to see what comes after this. So I think 5 kind of definitely put people off. And then again, maybe you're just not really keen on seeing horror sequels, which is a common philosophy. I mean, you think, oh, it's kind of diminishing returns, kind of trickles down, gets worse and worse and worse every time as they dilute it, and it gets farther away from the original. But again, we know on this show that I could not possibly disagree with that philosophy more. And I hope that our discussion today, kind of maybe opens your eyes, makes you think about Halloween 6 in a different light. This one, though, I did have the least amount of notes. Only 5 pages of notes, which is the least of those Halloween so far, least notes I've had in a while. But again, this movie is only 86 minutes long, so it's not necessarily... I don't even know how this movie was able to be released theatrically. I think you have to be 120 minutes maybe to be released theatrically, and this movie with credits is barely covering that. Sorry, I just had to take a gulp of water. Okay. So yeah, it opens and you see the Miramax logo right away. It's real weird, It's the buildings, and we've talked about it on this podcast before, I believe. Which is it's a how you see when you're a kid, you see a production logo and you get excited because you're yeah, I'm watching a movie. Awesome. I know that a movie's coming because this shit pops up, and then the movie right after. Terrific. I used to have that happiness when I would look at the Miramax logo. You know what I mean? I used to be yeah, all right, good movie's coming. I'm watching Good Will Hunting, or I'm watching Spy Kids. Anything by Robert Rodriguez or Tarantino. Fucking sick. But now I see that logo and I'm oh man, this is just not okay, right? What was going on behind the scenes of these movies exactly? And even now, especially seeing it on a Halloween movie, when you're used to not really seeing a logo except for, I guess, if you watch 2 or 3, you're seeing Universal. But usually it just opens and it's like, pow, Mustafa Akkad presents. And we still get that. Thank God. We still get that. But it was weird to see. But anyway, yeah. So this movie, I mean, I don't know if the producer's cut starts this way or not, but the theatrical cut goes right into this a woman being like wheeled down on a gurney, and she's pregnant, like these dark cave corridors, because I guess they're in like the lair of a cult. And then, you know, this woman is saying, "Uncle Michael, please don't hurt me," but it's like kind of distorted. And there's like candles and stuff everywhere, and cult sigils, and there's you know, runes and markings and people in robes, and it's like, oh man, is it Uncle Michael? Is this Jamie? Is this young Jamie Lloyd all grown up? Because, like, you know, like I said, they recast her, and they recast her with a woman who looks pretty much nothing like her. I guess she still kind of has dark hair, but it's like way shorter. And this woman, I think, J.C. Brandy, who played Jamie in this movie, was 20, even though the math here would have been that, like, she would have been like 12, I think, because I think that, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's been 6 years since the last one. The last one, I could have swore she was like 7 or 8. But now in this one, I mean, maybe they're going for like 17 or 18, but I don't know if that math tracks. But even so, she's being played by a 20-year-old woman who looks nothing like her. So you're like, oh, Uncle Michael, is that supposed to be Jamie? But yeah, so this woman in this cult cave facility thing gives birth to a baby, and the baby is handed over to none other than the man in black from the first one, or from part 5, who we didn't really understand who he was, and we still don't, other than I guess that he's like in charge or in cahoots with this cult that now has Jamie Lloyd and Jamie Lloyd's baby. So I guess following part 5, even though it showed the man in black like blowing up the police station and escaping with Michael, I guess he later went back and got Jamie as well. And then I guess he's just had both of these people in like his custody, holding them captive for like 6 years now. But anyway, the credit pops up starring and introducing Paul Stephen Rudd, so that's cool. That's cool to see. And then Paul Rudd is also narrating a voiceover at the beginning of this movie, which describes how Michael and Jamie both haven't been seen in 6 years, and then Michael Myers is like a famed serial killer who always kills on Halloween night and always goes after his relatives. And meanwhile, we see that the man in black has drawn like a strange sigil, like a symbol, on the baby, which turns out to be that like the thorn, the symbol of the thorn. It looks, you know, kind of like a kite, sort of. You know, it was featured inexplicably in the last one. You remember it was tattooed on Michael's wrist and then also on the man in black's wrist, which again is a symbol for the Cult of Thorn, and it's been drawn in blood on this newborn baby. And again, no one knows what the hell's going on. I guess the people of this cult, they represent this Cult of Thorn, which we don't really know what they're about. We don't really know what their goals are, but they have Michael, they have Jamie, they have this baby, and the baby is like being indoctrinated into the cult or something. But before you know it, a nurse, who we see this nurse helping Jamie give birth, and it's like a blonde lady, and we see her, she comes back later, and she's got Jamie's baby, and she's like, hey, Jamie, we're getting you out of here, we're busting you out. No idea why this woman wouldn't have done this any time in the previous 6 years that Jamie has been here. But this kind nurse frees Jamie and her baby and is like, here, go up these stairs. There's a door. Get the hell out of here. Before the first death scene, which is this poor, nice nurse that decided to help Jamie and then gets pretty much murked immediately after. Because they're in this hallway and she hears a noise and she's like, oh, what's that? Jamie, is that you, or are you still here? But then, boom, Michael steps out of the shadows. It is a pretty cool introduction for Michael, I gotta say. even though Michael looks, and again, no offense to George P. Wilbur, Michael has not been missing any meals in this one. He's looking huge. And not huge as in muscular, huge as in doughy. He's looking wide in the hips and the gut. I literally wrote in my notes, kind nurse frees Jamie before fat Michael impales her head on a spike. Because again, they're not in the cult lair anymore. I guess they're in like this again, the geography of this movie is also kind of hard to discern. Because like they're in this underground cave, Jamie gives birth, but then next door at the same underground facility, there is like a hospital, and everything's kind of cold and technical looking and white, and like linoleum floors. But then randomly, there's in this hallway, which Jamie just escaped from. There's just a spike, like a stone-looking spike sticking out of the wall. And Michael takes this lady by the face and just impales her head on the spike. So it's a pretty cool first kill, very memorable for me as a child. But yeah, Michael, we'll talk about the mask. The mask is definitely a huge improvement over the last two. In this one, because it has features, it looks very similar to the original mask used in the first two, but the hair is very crazy and spiky. Like, I understand the hair in the first one wasn't exactly neat, but this one almost looks like spiky on purpose, like it has cowlicks or something. But yeah, so Michael obviously is in pursuit of Jamie and the baby. I wrote down in my notes, discount Winona Ryder looking Jamie, because this woman, J.C. Prandy, who's playing Jamie, also does kind of look like Winona Ryder, but just like a poor man's watered down version of Winona Ryder. So she flees the facility, and the facility, she goes through this door, and suddenly she's like in like they're near all this like production. There's like of all this industrial equipment, and there's this trucker guy pretty near where she escapes, and he's drinking a beer in the rain for no reason. And she goes over and she gets in that guy's truck and she goes to drive away, and that guy tries to stop her, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? And despite Jamie's warnings, Michael comes up and he kills the guy by twisting his head all the way around, and like kind of like it just falls, like he twists it around and it reveals like the top of the spine, because he basically rips his head off, but not really. It's another cool kill right off the bat. I think this version is the gorier version, as opposed to the producer's cut, which I think tries to capture the vibe of the first one more, which is it's more thrilling and less gory. But again, this one kind of steps up the gore, which I'm not mad at, as we know. I'm kind of a gore hound. You know what I mean? It's one of the most uncool things I've ever said. But meanwhile, we smash cut a million miles away to these people we've never met before. Who one of them is a little boy, and he's, I guess, like having visions or seeing like having nightmares of the man in black in his room, and it's like a little blonde kid. Sorry, big yawn. With like a bowl cut, and he's having visions of the man in black. And the man in black is whispering for him to kill for me, Danny, which is actually kind of reminiscent of like Freddy in Nightmare 2 when he's like tempting Jesse to kill for him. But this little dude turned out to be Danny Strode, who is the son of Kara, played by Marianne Hagen, which is Laurie's adopted cousin. And they live in the old Myers house, like I said. So, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, obviously. Laurie's father was Mason Strode. And I guess Mason Strode had a brother named John, who is Kara's father. And John and his wife Deborah, who are like Laurie's adopted uncle and aunt, live in this house with their daughter Kara, her son Danny, and then Kara's brother Tim. So there's 5 Strodes in this house, all kind of loosely connected to Laurie, and like who knows what the hell they've been doing this entire time, or where they've been. But it's funny. Kara comes in to like comfort Danny, and it's just like, hey, it's okay, baby, it's just bad dreams, don't worry, go back to bed. And she like goes to leave, and then she looks at a drawing of that Danny made up on the wall, and it's, hey, but whoa, it's the Cult of Thorn symbol. Crazy. I guess he's been seeing it in his visions that will go unexplained for quite some time. Yeah, but then we follow Kara upstairs to her room, and they needlessly show her undress. I mean, like, I'm not going to say that she's not like in good shape or whatever. She doesn't look good, but I don't think we really need to see that. I guess it's just Harvey Weinstein trying to sex up the movie because he's a gross, disgusting pervert. So we see her. Also, Kara has like the most beautiful, like thick head of hair. It's like this thick, like wavy red hair. It's absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, we see her needlessly undress, and she's listening to shock jockey Barry Sims, who's doing a special like Halloween episode. They're discussing Michael Myers. Barry Sims will factor in later. Remember that name. And she looks out the window, and oh, guess what? Paul Rudd is peeping on her from across the street. So we see Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd's introduced as kind of a prevert weirdo guy. And then we cut to Paul Rudd, who's also listening to the same shock jockey in his weird, gross, cluttered, paranoid Zodiac type room. Because I guess whoever Paul Rudd is playing, Tommy Doyle, is like obsessed with Michael Myers and is listening to this show. And he's calling in, he's talking about Michael and saying that he's a survivor. And at that same time, we cut over again to Loomis, old Loom. And he's seen comfortably retired in like a log cabin with a full beard. And he's got this like green cable knit sweater. And he is also listening to shock jockey Barry Sims. Barry Sims, as you know, the connective tissue between all these characters somehow. And he's getting a visit from his old friend Terrence, who we haven't really met. He's like, oh, Terrence, come in out of the rain. It's raining, by the way. And like, we don't know who this guy is. He's old, but like Loomis, but not quite old. It's Mitch Ryan, the bad guy from Lethal Weapon 1. And they're talking and discussing things. So we're seeing three groups of characters are all listening to this shock jockey, Barry Sims. But then we go back to Jamie, and we see that Jamie, after stealing that truck, has arrived at an empty bus depot. And she has taken shelter there and is attempting to contact, there's a phone at the bus depot, and she's like, goes to call someone, but she doesn't know who to call, because when she was abducted, she was like 10, she doesn't have phone numbers memorized. But then Barry Sims is also playing in the bus depot, because everyone in the world only listens to Barry Sims. Also, like, I don't know, I feel like if you're in a bus depot, I've never been inside of a public transport, like a bus station or a train station that plays like shock jock, inappropriate, weird Halloween radio. They usually play like music or nothing. I don't know why this bus depot would be playing a shock jockey Barry Sims. But she hears Barry Sims' phone number aloud, and which is, by the way, 1-800-YOU-SUCK, which is hilarious. But she dials the number, and we cut to Loomis again. Loomis and Terrence Wynn, who are toasting a little bit of brandy to Loomis's retirement, which is nice, and they both toast to retirement and new beginnings, and it's actually hilarious because it just seems like a weird editing thing and like a weird script thing, because they're like, to retirement, and then within one breath, Terrence Wynn is like, Sam, I'd like you to come back and run Smith's Grove. And I'm like, hey man, didn't you guys just toast to retirement? But then Loomis has this cute line where he says, it's not wise to play Halloween pranks on me. Not a good Loomis. I don't know, I guess I lost my Loomis. But at that time, Loomis and Paul Rudd, separately of course, hear Jamie's plea, because Jamie's on the air with Barry Sims after calling from the bus depot. And she warns about, Michael's coming after me, somebody help me, please, Dr. Loomis, are you out there? And Dr. Loomis obviously, perks up, he's like, what's up? But it's too late, because guess what? Michael's at the bus depot, and she has to hang up because she has to run away. And she's got a baby with her, by the way. Her baby's still there. My note says, Michael's wig is wild in this one. Spiky as hell. Funny note. So Jamie escapes Michael by climbing out of the bathroom window, and she gets in her truck and she drives away. But Michael is after her again. He's driving again in this one, folks. We see Michael driving, and he runs Jamie off the road, and she crashes through a fence onto a nearby farm, where she's chased into a barn. A lot of barn stuff going on in Halloween 5 and 6. A lot of barn stuff. But yeah, Michael stalks her for a little bit. There's not a lot of build up for that. But then Michael just pops up out of nowhere and picks Jamie up and throws her onto a corn thresher, which it's hard to visualize, I guess, but it's this giant contraption with these big kind of metal serrated spikes on it. So he just impales her on this thing, and then she's Michael, please, and he goes to put his hands on her, and you think, oh, he's gonna comfort her and touch her, but he just takes his hands and shoves her farther on the corn thresher before turning it on and essentially eviscerating her. It's a very very kind of tragic, horrible end for what was our main character in the last two movies. But before Jamie dies, she says, "You can't have the baby, Michael." And then when Michael goes back to look for the baby in the truck, what does he find inside the little blankets? The little baby blankets? A paper towel roll. So the baby's gone. Where's the baby? But then we cut to John Strode, Kara's father, and he's in the front yard of their house, and there's a for sale sign that says "sold" on it, because I guess they just moved into the Myers house. That someone has glued a Michael Myers cutout to, and it says "Happy Halloween." It's obviously a prank, and John is very upset about this because he's an angry asshole in this. That's his whole character. And it's funny, there's a for sale sign that has all this vandalism on it, and what he does is he chops it down with an axe. I'm like, hey man, that's a for sale sign. It's just stuck in the ground with a stake. You can just rip it out. But he's literally chopping it down with an axe, which is funny. But I guess it's just to draw attention to the axe for later. Heads up, remember the axe for later. But yeah, we see John go inside, and he's having breakfast with his family, and he's a total cock. He hits his daughter Kara, and admonishes her at the table for getting pregnant and having a child so young, and having to come back to their doorstep after all these years, and how she's a disgrace. But it's funny because when he hits her, Danny pulls a knife on him. And you think to yourself, oh man, Danny's kind of cracked, huh? He's kind of effed up. Something's wrong with this kid. He almost murdered John in this flurry after John slapped Kara. So, but yeah, so this is the scene where we meet the Strode. We meet dickhead father John, passive mother Deborah, named after John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, the original writers and producers of the original one. And we meet brother Tim, who's Kara's brother, who's a very grungy, kind of Andy Wood type guy. He's got long hair and a flannel jacket. And he has an annoying girlfriend whose name I don't know. Yeah, like I said, the fashion is very 90s. Little Danny is wearing literally a backwards flannel hat and a flannel jacket. And they start walking to school together, even though they're not in high school, they're in college, but it seems like they're in high school. But they're definitely all 30 years old. And then we see Loomis Loomis and Wynn, they go to the crime scene at the barn, and they find out that Jamie has sadly passed. But again, this is a very brief scene. I think I find out, I personally, you don't until now, I'm telling you. I found out later that Joe Chapelle cut a lot of Loomis's scenes, either cut them down or just took them out completely because he found them boring, and I guess he and Loomis did not get along on set, which again, that's one strike against Joe Chapelle, but that's one of the biggest ones. I mean, he's literally the heart and soul of the series, so I don't know why you're cutting him out, but yeah, we then cut to Paul Rudd, and Paul Rudd is using old-timey computer equipment and recording software, but technology, to isolate sounds within Jamie's phone call, which I guess he recorded from the radio show last night. And he figures out through isolating the sounds of the above head speaker, calling out times, that the call came from a bus station. And he goes to the depot and he finds the baby. stuffed in one of the cupboards where where Jamie did the switcheroo with the paper towel. So now Paul Rudd's character, Tommy, has this baby. Which, by the way, I don't really understand why, this is like a giant plot hole, I think, but like why if Michael knew Jamie had the baby and they were just at the bus station, and it's literally the night before, and he's like, oh, I have this paper towel roll that was switched out for the baby, obviously. Wonder where we could have got a paper towel roll from. Like, why Michael wouldn't just go back. Michael had a car, he had a truck that he ran Jamie off the road with. So obviously he could just go back to the bus depot that they were just at. It was probably 5 minutes away. And could have got the baby, but for some reason he doesn't think to do that and he just leaves. And Paul Rudd is able to pick up the baby the next day. But Paul Rudd brings the baby to the local hospital, where he tries to get some help, but no one wants to get him help because he's being weird and aggressive towards the nurses. But he runs into Loomis, and they link up, and Paul Rudd reveals here that he's Tommy Doyle. And he's like, hey, you're Loomis, you can help me. This is Jamie Lloyd's baby. Even though Michael has killed Jamie, this is the last of his bloodline right here, so he'll be after her. We need to help this baby. And Loomis is like, okay. But then Tommy's rushed out by like the hospital security, and they agree to meet later at some sort of weird festival that's happening later that night. Because they believe that the baby and the Strodes too are in danger, so they then kind of band together to help them. And meanwhile, the Strodes definitely are in danger, because as we speak, Michael is like stalking Kara's mother, Deborah. Why, I have no idea. It seems like he's kind of hell-bent on doing this like cult business. And again, like it seems like he kind of had free range of the place this whole time. So I don't know what suddenly would direct him to go to the Myers house at this point. Again, I think this is just like because this film had so many iterations and versions and so much stuff was cut out or filmed and like or never filmed, and I don't know, there's a lot of like I guess continuity and giant plot holes, but you know, it's still fun, so don't you worry. But yeah, Loomis shows up and he warns her about Michael, and for some reason she has no idea that like a serial killer used to live in this house, and that like their adopted niece was like hunted by this madman for years, and that then her daughter was hunted by this madman for years. They have no idea. They're completely oblivious. They must have been living like halfway around the world, because the woman is just like calls up her husband, is like, oh my gosh, John, why didn't you tell us what happened in this house? Why didn't we ever move here? And John is like, well, how do you think we got a good deal on the house, Deborah? And I'm like, well, you know, how did she not possibly know? But yeah, Loomis, he oh gosh, he gives a classic Loomis line, which there are not a lot of in this movie, unfortunately, because Loomis, I mean, like through like 2, 4, and 5, he's like ramping up. You know, he's getting more unhinged and off the rails with each one. Before in this one, I mean, he's super old. He's like 75, so, and he's retired, so he's just really kind of docile and relaxed for most of this one. I mean, in the scenes he's even in, because he's not in a lot. I think in this theatrical cut, he has like 8 minutes of screen time, which is a huge bummer. I'd love to watch the producer's cut because I think he's featured more heavily. But Deborah asks what we're all wondering, which is, why would Michael come back here after all this time? To which Loomis responds with, this house is sacred to him. It holds all his memories, his rage. And he focuses on the rage again, which we love to hear Loomis talking about the rage, because like I don't know what the hell does that even mean, is a rage. But it's like a classic Loomis line, and one of the last ones I think we get for him. But yeah, so Loomis heads out. We don't even see him leave, but he just leaves, and we don't even know why he would leave and not stay to like protect this woman. But I guess he's got places to be, so he goes. And she's like, she's about to leave. She's packing before she comes down the stairs, and she realizes that the axe is gone. Remember the axe? She had brought it inside earlier, and now it's not where she left it. And she receives a phone call, and she picks up the phone, and a distorted voice is like, we want the child. We want the child. And you're like, oh, are they talking about Danny or like that baby? But why? She doesn't know anything about the baby. And why do they want the Danny? I don't really. Why they want Danny is just never explained really in this movie, in this cut of the movie anyway. But yeah, Deborah hangs up, and then she turns around, and then Michael is literally just like in the next room standing, and she just freaks out. She runs away, and she's like chased through a bunch of hung up laundry in the backyard, which is kind of a nod to the original when Jamie Lee Curtis sees Michael standing outside her window. Among like sheets hung up on like laundry lines, whatever. You know how people hang up laundry on lines and shit. They don't do that anymore, but like, you know. But she falls to the ground, and then she's crawling, and then she pushes the sheet to the side, and then boom, Michael is there, and he axes her right in the face, and we see blood splatter across the crisp white sheets, which is a pretty good kill. But we cut to later on. Kara comes home, and her mom's not home. No one's home until she finds Danny upstairs, and Danny's with Tommy. And she's obviously wigged about this weird stranger who was spying on her earlier being in her house, but she gets over it really quick. And Tommy convinces them to all go across the street because it's not safe. And this is where Tommy breaks down to Kara, hey, serial killer used to live in your house, Michael Myers. And he's probably after you guys because you guys live in his house now. And then he goes through all this stuff about how the symbol Michael has on his wrist and the symbol that Danny's been drawing is the rune of Thorn. And he explains how, according to Celtic legend, the rune symbol Thorn represented a demon, and that one child from every tribe was inflicted with the curse of Thorn, and a family would be killed and sacrificed on Halloween to appease that demon. And that every time this constellation appears, the constellation of Thorn, like in the stars, appear, Michael did too. And that he is like an agent of the demon Thorn. Which, again, I know that's a whole lot of exposition that I just dropped, and it's all absolutely batshit crazy. Let me go through that one more time. So apparently this symbol, which appears every year on Halloween, or it appears every time Michael appears, which, again, Michael has appeared at pretty irregular intervals. Because, I mean, he appeared 15 years later, from 1963 to 1978, and then 10 years later, and then a year later, and now 6 years later. So I guess this constellation just appears at really irregular intervals. But every time it appears, he appears. And that Michael, having been cursed by this cult at a very young age, was inflicted with the curse of Thorn, which is, like, I guess, where he gets his power. And, like, the fact that he is unkillable and an unstoppable machine, basically. And that he is like cursed to kill his family until there's like no one left in the family. And then when that family is killed, a new person will be infected with the curse of Thorn. And I guess Jamie is supposed to be Michael's like final sacrifice. Like as soon as he kills Jamie, the curse will be lifted off him. Okay, so we see Tommy leave because he has to go meet up with Loomis, which I guess is why Loomis left earlier. But again, if Tommy's just now going to meet up with Loomis, where the hell's Loomis been? Maybe some scenes were cut. Anyway, so Tommy leaves. And Tommy, by the way, lives in like a boarding house across the street from the old Myers house. And the boarding house is like run by Mrs. Blankenship, this old lady. And Kara and Danny are left with this old lady. And this old lady starts to spout out this weird mythos about Halloween. For some reason, she knows the Celtic origins of like Samhain and like how people would light like jack-o'-lanterns to keep the demons away and stuff, and how they would wear costumes to do that too. And she seems really weird and overzealous about Halloween, which is like just a definite red flag. And then this lady then goes on to talk about how she was babysitting Michael Myers in 1978 or in 1963 when he murdered his sister, and that she knows that Michael heard voices that told him to kill his family too, just like Danny is hearing now. So like, is Danny about to be indoctrinated into the next Cult of Thorn? Is he about to become the next agent of them? By the way, this is the only real part of this movie where this is mentioned, and that through line is not really seen again in this cut of the film. But meanwhile, John has arrived home from his work at the real estate office, and he's drunk as a skunk because he's been drinking at work, I guess, because he's a piece of shit, totally deplorable character. And no one's there. The house is empty. And he's like, he thinks that his wife has left him. But hey, the lights go out. Weird. So John has to go to the basement, and he finds in the basement, like the laundry machine is running, the washing machine, laundry machine, and he opens it up, and it's just soaked in blood. All you see is like bloody sheets, which I don't really understand. But that's funny though too, because it actually, I know it's not a nod to Halloween Resurrection because that movie came out later, but in Halloween Resurrection there's a scene in the beginning where a washing machine is running and a guy looks inside the washing machine. There's a severed head in there. So that movie actually takes this scene and kind of does it better. But I think it's funny how there's so much laundry death involved in Halloween. But yeah, he picks up the bloody sheets and he turns around, and then Michael is there, and he like stabs John and impales him on like the I don't know, I guess like the fuse box, like the electric generator thing that they have. And then John gets electrocuted, and his flesh fries and bubbles before, and he foams the mouth to the point where then his head literally explodes. And it's like super gnarly and gross, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But it's still a great kill. Definitely a memorable one. And like, thank God that guy's dead. He's like a total piece of shit, and he definitely deserved to die horribly. But again, like, I mean, it begs the question, like, why Michael was there earlier when he killed Deborah, but then wasn't there when Kara came home and Danny and Tommy were there, but then I guess after they left, he came back to kill John. Michael's trajectory in this movie is pretty much untraceable. But yeah, so we cut back to the Barry Sims show. And Barry Sims, the shock jockey, is totally revealed to be an asshole. And like Kara's brother Tim and Tim's girlfriend, who I can't remember the name of, and they're really not important to the story at all. They're like talking to Barry Sims like on his show live, because I guess like she is like some sort of spokesperson for Haddonfield, and like wants Halloween to mean something again, and wants it to not be associated with Michael Myers. But Barry Sims is just like kind of being disrespectful and cracking jokes the whole time about how fiery she is, and like about how attracted to her he is, and he's just being a total asshole and ignoring everything she's saying. And then they agree to cut the show so they can go film at Tim's house, because his girlfriend Beth, her name is Beth, reveals that Tim lives in the Myers house, and he's like, hey, Michael Myers is cool, that gets ratings, let's pack this up and take it to the Myers house. And before that, he has Barry Sims has a line where he says, referring to Beth and how fiery she is, I bet she wears crotchless panties and barks like a dog, huh? To Tim, which is the most like disgusting sentence in the entire world, and also like, what the hell are you talking about? But like, Barry Sims is dispatched pretty much right after. Like, and why Michael is here at this weird festival thing, and why he would kill Barry Sims, doesn't track at all. Michael just appears in the back of Barry Sims' van and stabs him, which I like. Again, another guy that kind of deserved to die, and I'm cool with him dying because he was an asshole. But again, that I don't really know. But then Michael takes it to the extreme, and he actually covers Barry in like Halloween lights and strings him up in a tree, where Barry's blood then like rains down on people. And again, how Michael does this, we have no idea, because there's all of these people around at this festival. But let's not read too much into that. This little girl is like, oh my gosh, Mom, it's raining blood. And then everyone, including Tommy and Loomis, like look up, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's that guy. And everyone starts screaming and panicking because Barry Sims has been like stuck up in a tree with lights on him and stuff. It's pretty silly, but it's interesting. But we see Tim and Beth. They leave and they go back to the Myers house. And they're like talking, and then they have sex or whatever, yada yada yada. I don't care. Who cares about these characters? They're just there to be killed, because then Michael suddenly appears at the Myers house, and it's funny actually. Tim gets out of the shower, and he's like, "Hey babe, can you hand me a towel, babe?" And then like someone hands him a towel, and Tim takes a towel, and when the towel is ripped away, you see that it's Michael because you can see the Cult of Thorn tattoo on his wrist, and also his hands are gross. But yeah, Tim gets out of the shower. And then like Michael comes up behind him and just slashes his throat. And then Beth is also killed. He's hacked to death by Michael, that's a cool scene. It's like very effective because it's in slow-mo, so we can see Michael's just stabbing into her and to the back. And this is all happening while she's on the phone with Kara, because Kara calls to the house because she sees the lights around. She's like, oh my gosh, Beth, why are you and Tim over there? You need to get out of there right away. Something's going on, just as like Michael comes in and kills her. And then meanwhile, for some reason, Danny feels this compulsion to like leave, and he goes and wanders over to the Myers place where Kara has to go get him. And Kara inside, she finds Tim and Beth's like bodies like staged in bed, and she's horrified. But again, it kind of is reminiscent of Michael in the first movie when he stages all of Laurie's friends' bodies at the end. Like, he's an artist, you know. He's so theatrical, and he creates these ornate designs with like the people he kills, and like he did it with Barry Sims earlier. And I think that's kind of an homage to the original that I think is fun. But yeah, so Kara gets to Danny before they're chased by Michael. But Kara actually pulls this interesting move where she like fakes like she's going down the stairs, and then she like hides off to the side. And then when Michael like starts walking down the stairs, she comes out from the corner and like beats him over the head and throws him down the stairs, which I thought was pretty cool. Kara's actually a pretty like decent final girl. I actually prefer her probably to I might even prefer her to Rachel. I think they're on an even playing field. And she's definitely better than like Laurie in Halloween 2 because she's largely absent. And she's definitely better than like Tina and Sam from the last one. But she's pretty good. She's got some moxie. I just wish they had more. And I guess she really cared about this movie and was like really, really enthusiastic and involved in the production, which I think is very admirable. But Michael, they managed to escape, but Michael pursues them across the street, and they get inside safely. But the Man in Black is inside, and the Man in Black is freaking revealed to be Terrence Wynn from earlier, which is Loomis's old buddy from Smith Grove. And like he and Blankenship, I guess, are just part of the cult, and they're there and they abduct Kara and Danny and the baby, but they leave Loomis and Danny. Or not Loomis and Danny, Loomis and Tommy. It's so funny because like all of our characters show up at like the boarding house because they want to get the baby, and like Loomis and Danny and Tommy and Kara, and like they're there and they're like, "Where's the baby?" And Wynn's like, "I've got the baby. Me and Blankenship here are in the cult, and I'm the Man in Black." And then for some reason, like, they abduct Kara, Danny, and the baby, but they leave Loomis and Tommy there. Like we see it from their point of view. They come too, I guess, after being drugged or knocked out, and those three are gone, and all the cult members are gone. And they're like, it's inexplicable why they do it. Why they don't kidnap them too, or why they don't kill them. Because literally, Tommy, Paul Rudd's character, is like to Loomis, he's like, why were we left alive? And like literally we're all thinking that too. It makes no sense. I think Loomis is just like, cause he wants us in wants to play the game, or some dumb answer. Loomis, again, this is like the third scene he's been in the movie. And like, again, if they killed Loomis and Paul Rudd, who would go after the baby and Kara and Danny and save them? Nobody. So they have to be left alive to further the plot, even though it makes no logical sense. So we track Loomis and Tommy, who are in the pursuit of Kara, Danny, and the baby and the cult members. And for some reason, I don't know why they have this knowledge, but they go to Smith's Grove, which is the institution that Michael originally resided at, and is where Terrence Wynn and Dr. Loomis worked in the original one. and the cultist layer is like underneath of it, but also part of it. Again, no one knows why or how they get there, but it's all here. This is the climax of the movie, basically. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of notes. This movie's very short. But Loomis confronts Wynn in his office, and Wynn confusingly asks Loomis to like join him and like lead the cult. Basically, he's like, "Oh, Loomis, I want you to be my successor," which doesn't make any fucking sense at all, because Loomis is like way older than this guy and way more feeble, and had just had a stroke and a heart attack at the end of the last movie. But Loomis, of course, declines his offer, rebuffs it, and then is promptly knocked unconscious. Like, again, why they're just like, it's just sloppy editing, and like it's just like obviously this movie, by the end of the production, we'll talk about this in a bit, had kind of forced out all of the people who cared about this movie, like Daniel Farrands and Mustafa Akkad, and then it's just like it's the Weinsteins and Joe Chapelle kind of just schlocking, throwing stuff together. Because Loomis is knocked out. Like, why Wynn didn't just say this to Loomis when they were at the house, and like why he didn't kidnap him and bring him there and ask him these questions, makes no sense. Like, to literally leave Loomis alive so Loomis can come and confront you, and then you could ask him, and then when he rebuffs you, you then just knock him out and don't kill him, so then he can be there at the end, but not till the very end, makes almost no sense. And but meanwhile, Tommy, he finds Kara and he breaks out Kara before being confronted by like another one of the Smith Grove's patients, who like pops out at Tommy as like a jump scare, but it turns out she's been stabbed and she's dying, and like, oh, who stabbed her? Michael Myers. And like, why Michael Myers stabbed this woman or is going around stabbing people in Smith Grove, unexplained. Like, Michael Myers has seemingly been living in this facility for the past 6 years, and like why he would suddenly go nuts, and or like why he would even come back here at all. Like, is he part of the cult? Is he with the cult? Is he opposed to what they're doing? We have no idea. But he suddenly starts killing the Smiths Grove patients, and then comes after Kara and Tommy. And Kara has been fitted in this white gown, which it's unexplained why she's in this white gown. And while they're being pursued by Michael, Wynn and his team are like prepping for surgery. We don't know who they're doing surgery on. Are they doing surgery on the baby, or Danny, or Kara? We don't know. Or Michael? It's not explained. But while they're doing this, Michael just bursts in and he slaughters like all the medical personnel. And it's like a cool scene because Michael, he picks up what is basically like a surgical version of a machete. It's just a long knife. And he bursts in and he kills, like, bloodily, stabbing and slicing. And he sliced up this entire medical staff. And like basically all these cult members are dead. Why Michael would do this? Again, I'm sorry to keep saying this, but it's unexplained. Michael, as far as we know, could have done this at any point, because he's been living with these cult members this whole time. They have had him, or they've been working together. So why Michael at the end? Like, I understand that he is and has always been like a ruthless, mindless killing machine, but like why he would suddenly kill these people, it is not, they don't bother to possibly tell you. And again, like when I was young and watching this, and like even in high school watching this on TV, just casually, I'd be like, yeah, whatever, Michael Myers kills people. But in the context of this movie, it does not make any sense. Like, these people are trying to do, if anything, do Michael a favor and like get him to kill the baby and end his curse. But he just murders them all. And that solves like our protagonist's problems, but it doesn't make any logical sense. So Michael is again pursuing like our group of people, which is like Danny, Kara, Paul Rudd, and the baby. And Michael kills like a guy. They managed to lock Michael in this like hallway down this corridor, but then he uses this doctor's face, who the last surviving cult member who ran away. He uses his face to like pound through the door and smashes his head through these metal bars, which is a pretty cool kill. A lot of great kills in this movie, I will say. And he uses it to like basically bash down the door. And then again, this ending especially, from everything I've read, was just kind of thrown together willy-nilly. None of it makes any sense at all. Our gang, like, they enter into this room, and it's a room surrounded by fetuses and like half-grown babies in tanks of green goo, which, I don't know, maybe posit that they've been experimenting, and maybe Jamie has been pregnant multiple times, or they've been like engineering these babies for Michael to kill. Again, it's not elaborated on at all, but there's a bunch of fetuses in tanks of green goo. And like Paul Rudd manages to kind of trick Michael with a baby switcheroo again, because he's like, hey, Michael, over here, look, I've got this baby, right? It's just a bundle of blankets. But the jig is actually up, because the baby does start crying halfway across the room, and Michael gets wise to the trick, but not before Tommy is able to stab him with several syringes of whatever this green goo is. And then Kara comes along and beats him severely with a pipe, but Michael is able to actually get the upper hand until Danny distracts him, and then Michael is again injected with whatever this thing is, and then he's beaten terribly, like within an inch of his life, seemingly, with the same pipe by Tommy, which is kind of cool because you get to see Tommy kind of get his revenge, and like, hey, he's going to unload this trauma onto you, Michael. Like the main reason that Tommy has the trauma, he's getting this kind of a revenge arc for Tommy, and it's kind of satisfying for us to see. But Tommy beats Michael savagely until green goo starts to come out of Michael's like orifices, like his eyes and nose and mouth. Again, no idea why. Is this Michael's blood? Why is Michael's blood green? Does it have something to do with him being in this cult? Is Michael a robot? It's I know I said this a million times. It's not explained. So Tommy successfully beats Michael within an inch of his life, I guess into unconsciousness, seemingly almost kills him, before the gang regroups, and now with no one in their way, they just kind of walk out of the facility. Loomis is there again too, but then Loomis opts to, he's like, hey, you guys go on ahead, I'm going to stay behind and finish what I started. And then the group is like, I don't really know what the hell that means, but we're going to go, goodbye. And then our protagonists leave, and then Loomis walks back into the building, and then the final shot, because the movie's over. The final shot is the camera is on the lab, and then it pans down, and then we see Michael's mask just lying on the ground next to an empty syringe, and then we hear Loomis's screams heard in the background, seemingly of Michael killing him, like an unmasked Michael confronting him and killing him, but it cuts to black, and then In Memory of Donald Pleasance comes on the screen, and that's it. That's the movie. Again, like literally not a bad first half of a movie, or not a bad like first 3/4 of a movie. I think they set up a lot of great stuff, but the end is incredibly abrupt and illogical and confusing, and it's because the people who ended up finishing this movie off did not give a shit about the movie. And I'll get into that later, but yeah, that's it. That's the movie. And I think, of course, like the best scene, even though it doesn't make sense, is Michael tearing into those doctors. Because I think it's a kind of a well done sequence, because there's like strobing effects and like kind of metal music playing, and Michael is just hacking these people to death, and they're people we don't like. So hey, cool, that's a dub. But again, other good sequences are like with Michael and Jamie in the barn and that chase, and I think Michael pursuing Deborah and killing John Strode are good too. But again, I think this movie ultimately is done a disservice by not having a lot of connective tissue and little Loomis. I would say best performance in this movie, I would say it's Loomis, because he's been our MVP in Halloween 2, 4, and 5, but I can't give it to him this time, unfortunately, because he's just not in the movie very much. And I would give it to Paul Rudd, but Paul Rudd is doing this weird thing with his voice where oh, hello, Michael. He's talking like this weird monotone thing, because I guess he's like trying to convey that he's traumatized and he's like obsessed with Michael and paranoid, but I think it just doesn't come off well. And I mean, like he's like a young actor playing like a weirdo incel paranoid type, so I just think it doesn't come off well. So I think honestly I'm gonna have to give the best performance in this movie to maybe George Wilbur as Michael, because I think in this one he does a pretty good job, a much better job I think than he did in part 4, or Marianne Hagen, who plays Kara Strode, because I think she is kind of a badass final girl. And I think there's multiple instances in the movie where she's beating Michael Myers with like a pipe. And she like pushes Michael Myers on the stairs, and she's like going out of her way to protect her son. And I think that's really cool. I think she does a great job. But again, I don't know, performance-wise, this isn't the best movie. Best kill, I guess I'll go with probably John Strode. Seeing the head explode, those effects are pretty good. And it's very satisfying because, you know, he's presented as just like the world's biggest asshole. So to see him be like on end like that is very satisfying. As for improvements, I might have a bit. Just generally though, I would just add more Loomis. I would put as much Loomis as you can in these movies, because he's literally like the heart and soul and one of the most developed characters. I mean, he's the only real returning, I mean, I guess like Tommy Wallace is in there, but he was like a kid, so it doesn't matter. But he's like one of the only returning characters from like the original, and you know, he was in the second one, and he's been in all these. He's basically he's the only actor even from the last 2 movies to feature in this movie again. So like, except, I mean, I guess Jamie Lloyd, but she's barely in this movie, killed at the very beginning, played by a different actress. So just have as much Loomis as possible. I would maybe cut like, again, like I'd love to see like the producer's cut, which like I think is the closest realization of the original script, or I would love to read the original script. But just and maybe like if you had just like filmed that as written, that it would have been better, explained more of this stuff. But I think at the base level, I might have, I don't know, maybe cut out the like Strode stuff. Like I understand that they want to protect this baby, and it's Loomis and Tommy Doyle teaming up, and then maybe they also have to protect whoever is living in the Myers house. But I don't think it needed to be Strode's. I think that actually almost adds to the confusion, because the fact that these people would move in here and have no idea what happened here, even though, I mean, this is literally like very close family to you guys. Like they're closely related, and like Laurie Strode and her daughter have been tormented by this guy for decades. So just like the fact that like they had no idea what was going on and they moved there, and then it just happens to be Strode's, like it doesn't really play in. And I think Danny's kind of arc, whatever it is like totally goes like nowhere, and it's unexplained why the cult wants him. I mean, I guess we can infer that they wanted to start, that they wanted to pass the curse of Thorn onto him, and then he would have to kill his family. But I just, like, I don't know if that's necessary, really. Like, maybe just have the cult exist. They, like, engineer the creation of this baby so that Michael can kill the baby and finally end the curse. But again, we want to protect the baby because it's an innocent life. Like, just have a story where Loomis and Tommy are trying, and like feature them heavily. Like, neither of those actors, despite being the mains, are like featured very heavily for like long durations of time in this movie. So just feature them both heavily, battling against this cult to try to save the soul of like and life of this baby. And maybe feature Jamie in more of it too. I mean, I just, like, as much as I like Kara Strode as like a character, I think the whole Strode family and like Danny Strode arc and like plot points are just like, I don't know, they just kind of distract and don't go anywhere, and it's just like there almost is too many characters at a certain point. Like the fact that at the end, like, our group of protagonists is literally like 5 people, accounting the baby. It's like, it's like kind of just so much. And like, I think the Barry Sims stuff is like, I don't know. It just could have. I think it could have been done better, possibly. Because he's like in the beginning of the movie, and the festival is like a whole through line in this whole movie, and then Barry Sims is introduced, and he's killed off immediately. So I don't know if there was additional Barry Sims stuff, but I don't know. Either cut that or make it better. But again, there's a lot of stuff to like. I mean, there's still Loomis in this movie, and like we get to see Loomis like kind of happy, retired, and like more toned down, and he still has some good lines. And you know, no, some Loomis is better than no Loomis. This movie has an awesome mask. I think the mask is probably the best it's looked since the original, and it's the best it's gonna look until like probably the David Gordon Greens, because I mean like the masks in Resurrection and H2O are god awful. I mean really pretty decent kills. There's not a lot of them. I think there's like maybe 20 if you count all the hospital personnel, but even that's a good scene. The nurse getting the spike through the head at the beginning, Jamie's kill, as much as I don't like the fact that it's Jamie, is like very visceral and like very good. I mean the gore effects are awesome. I love the fact that they tried to take a stab at an explanation for like why Michael has like this unquenchable bloodlust and why he murders. I'm one of those people who like, I definitely like things to be explained. I don't necessarily like oh, inexplicable, or it's up to your own interpretation. I really like you to just lay it out for me, because I'm a simple man. And I didn't even mind it. When I remember when they finally explained the cult stuff and like the Thorn curse in like part 6 when I was a kid, I was just like, thank God they finally, like, why, like, it's so confounding why they never explained why he was able to survive all these otherwise fatal injuries until now. So the fact that they're like telling us why now is terrific. I love that. I mean, like the dialogue between the characters is like logical, and there's no like really cringy lines. I think it's all very sorry, and like natural and organic, and I think all the actors and stuff are doing a good job. Like I don't think it's like some of the Friday the 13th where like the acting is legitimately bad. I think the acting in this movie is all pretty good. And it's just wacky as hell, like tonally, logically, visually, it's crazy to look at, and view and to follow, and it's like fun. I think you can get a lot of enjoyment out of it, just being like, oh man, this film by yourself, or if you were to watch it with a group of people, I mean, it'd be probably a ball, probably a hoot and a half. And there's just some nice being set in the 90s. I think the cinematography is kind of nice. I mean, it's like well lit, but like also it's so clear. Which again, I know it's kind of different from the Halloween 2 cinematography that I like so much. But like I like, you know, I can like both. I like the 90s where everything's kind of well lit, but also like kind of washed out looking, and like there's a lot of like the fashion is very grungy, and I just don't mind it. I like that era. Just like to sum it up, I mean, again, this is like a very, very flawed movie, but I can certainly appreciate what they were trying to do with this one. Like, I mean, they had like a tough job trying to tie together like 4 and like the events of 5 that were like totally inexplicable and and like just like hard to follow as fans of the franchise. And I think they kind of tied this one off nicely, even though I think the ending could have been done a lot better. I think I mean, the Man in Black, if you think about it, and the rune of Thorn was like introduced in the last movie, and they had no idea what they were doing with it, and we had no idea what it meant. And I think the explanation that this movie provided works. And like it's got a fast pace and a decently high body count, and like everyone in it is like good looking, and they're doing pretty good acting. They're doling out pretty good performances. I mean, Paul Rudd is in this movie. Donald Pleasance, like Marianne Hagen is like a good actress, and she's like very beautiful. And like the characters that you hate die horribly, and most of the characters that you like survive. And like as much as I don't necessarily like the death of Jamie, as like a plot point within the franchise itself, I can appreciate the fact that it wasn't actually Daniel Harris, so I was less attached to the woman who died. So I was like, meh, just a good kill, I guess. But yeah, I think it's just a very, very watchable film, which is more than I can say for most of Halloween 5, which is actually just kind of a slog, and it's like incredibly hard to get through. But yeah, anyway, that's all I've got note-wise. I'll just dive right into trivia, and we'll go through some of those. Some very interesting trivia. I mean, I'll read some cool tidbits of information from this Taking Shape book too, and then we'll go into like where it ranks, generally among like experts and fans through those articles that we always do. And then we'll talk about where like people's thoughts on the masks and people's thoughts on like the particular actor portraying Michael. So just like some quick trivia here. I guess the producers of the movie wanted Brian Andrews to reprise his role as Tommy Doyle from the original Halloween. Like the little kid grown up, they wanted like that actual kid. But I guess, however, Andrews did not have an agent because he wasn't really acting anymore. So they couldn't get in contact with him. So they just recast, which is funny. I mean, like, you're Hollywood. You must not have tried very hard. But I guess Brian Andrews has stated since that he regrets missing the opportunity. He totally would have done it if they would have got a hold of him. So, according to the Halloween 25 Years of Terror documentary that came out, most of the cast and crew like completely disowned this film, and they state that the studio producers and director interfered and argued with them to the point of ridiculousness, which resulted in a very poorly directed and edited film. And it was actually Daniel Farrands who suggested that the film be called The Curse of Michael Myers, due to the troubled production of the movie. Like, Michael Myers had cursed this film. Daniel Harris. Okay, so yeah, Daniel Harris wanted to reclaim her role as Jamie, but turned it down when Dimension refused to pay her $5,000 that she wanted. So she only wanted them to pay her $5,000, which is not a lot of money. I mean, I understand that she was a kid actor, but like $5,000 is not a lot. I mean, this movie's budget was $5 million, so you can give her 5 G's. And like it even is crazier because I guess Harris stated in an interview that when her agent learned that the filmmakers were looking to cast an actress who was at least 18 or older to play Jamie, she was only 17, but she wanted to do the movie so much that she got herself legally emancipated from her parents at the suggestion of the filmmakers so that she could work longer hours without having to go to school. So I guess Harris spent like a lot of time and like thousands of dollars on like legal fees to like achieve her emancipation, but ultimately didn't do the film because they didn't want to pay her any money, and because they were just going to kill her off anyway. And they literally like refused to pay her the salary of $5,000, which would have only served to cover her legal fees. And I guess she eventually met and befriended J.C. Brandy, who took over the role of Jamie in this film. And I guess J.C. Brandy told her that she was treated really poorly on the set because she was like the second choice. So like this studio, Miramax and like all those guys, F you, you suck. In the original draft of the movie, when John Strode came home from work, he turned on the TV, and the scene of the boy dying from Halloween 3, when the mask on his face turns into snakes, was going to be on. He was like supposed to say, "Oh, what is this shit?" and turn it off, which I think is funny. Screenwriter Daniel Farrands actually considers the producer's cut to be the superior version, although I guess he's not necessarily a fan of either. This is the only Halloween in the entire series to be filmed in the fall, which is interesting. Dr. Loomis and Michael share no scenes together in this version. In either version, actually, making this the only film in the series to feature both characters but never have them interact. Despite the fact that it's like hinted at that Loomis is killed by Michael at the end because you hear his screams, they're not on screen together. I guess Joe Chapelle was outspoken about not being a fan of the Halloween films, and he expressed that he was only involved in this project because it got him a 3-picture deal with Miramax. Okay. This one is actually very interesting. When Michael chases Tommy, Kara, Danny, and baby Steven. Oh, I forgot to mention Paul Rudd names the child Steven, which I think is interesting. Because that's Paul Rudd's middle name. Michael is actually played in that scene by A. Michael Lerner. Not like a person named Michael Lerner. It's A period. Like first initial A, Michael Lerner. For those, because those were reshoots. And Joe Chapelle, I guess, did not like George P. Wilbur's performance because he was too bulky to be playing Michael, which is very interesting because in Halloween 4 he was so not bulky that they had to give him like hockey pads to wear. So that's interesting. And I guess the Smiths Grove doctor who runs from Michael and is like killed when his head is shoved through the bars is that's A. Michael Lerner's father. Interesting. This one had the largest opening weekend out of the entire series until Halloween 2018. I guess Hellraiser Bloodline was being was in production at this time, and I guess was horribly over budget. So they reportedly have to slash $1 million from Halloween's budget as a result to compensate for Hellraiser Bloodline getting out of hand. Peter Jackson was asked to direct, but he declined. According to Marianne Hagen, she almost didn't receive the leading role of Kara Strode because Dimension Films apparently didn't like her physical appearance, deeming her too thin and her chin too pointy. God, Dimension Films sucks, I guess. Howard Stern was originally offered the role as a radio shock jock Barry Sims, but turned it down. Wise move, Howard Stern. I guess Kevin Williamson's original treatment for Part 7 originally acknowledged the events in 4, 5, and 6, but it was dropped to avoid confusion for the viewers. So it was like totally retconned all those. Even though Michael is supposed to be in like his late 30s in this movie, George P. Wilbur was 55. The original director was supposed to be Fred Walton, who had directed the original When a Stranger Calls. But I guess he, due to creative differences, bowed out pretty early on. This is the only film in the series without an opening title sequence, which is not great because guess what? Opening title sequences are like a Halloween mainstay. So actually, let me amend my improvements earlier. Put in an opening title sequence. How about that? Denise Richards was considered and turned down for the role of Beth. But yeah, they told her that she was all boobs, so they didn't want her, which I kind of counterintuitive for Miramax, but okay. The script went through 11 different drafts, which is a lot. This is the first Halloween movie where the Sheriff of Haddonfield is not a main character. During production, improper storage destroyed the Halloween 6 Curse of Michael Myers masks, leaving only 2 remaining in the world right now. So that's unfortunate because these are some dope masks. Even though it is not explained or shown in any of the scenes how Michael obtains his mask. Because I suppose it could be the same one from Part 5, but obviously it looks very different. So obviously at some point someone got him a new mask. Maybe the followers of Thorn made it for him. I don't know. This is what I was talking about. J.C. Brandy was 20 years old when this movie was released. Her character, Jamie, would have been only around 14, according to the timeline of Halloween 4 and 5. So, Daniel Harris totally was more equipped to play her, age-wise even, but they did not feel that was the way to go, I guess. Danny's name is a nod to Danny Torrance from The Shining. Not really know why you're doing that. I don't think the same people who like The Shining are going to be here necessarily. I mean, I guess I am, but I don't know. That's kind of a high art kind of thriller film, horror film. That's much higher brow than this. I don't know. I don't know if people who love The Shining are going to show up for Halloween 6. It's so funny how like on IMDb, which is where I get a lot of my information, they're like they like go into like what kind of cars are used in the movie and like what kind of knife Michael uses. Who cares? I've never found that stuff very interesting at all. I mean, if you do, that's cool. Just not necessarily for me. Oh, okay, and I guess another Shining nod. I guess the room Kara Strode is kept in at the end is room 237. Which again, I don't know why that's happening, but there we are. So yeah, that's all the trivia I've got. Aside from the stuff I'm going to read from the Taking Shape book. So again, I really highly, I know I said it over and over and over again. Just buy this book. It's really, if you're into this stuff, I would highly recommend. I'm not saying go buy this book or else. Like, I'm sorry, that kind of sounded weird and aggressive. If you're into this Halloween stuff, which I assume you are if you're listening to this, you will very much enjoy this book, I think, because it's just loaded with like cool tidbits of information, production details, interviews. I mean, like this interview with Dominique Othen and Gerard actually kind of changed my perception on Halloween 6. I thought it was so good. And I mean, like, I'll just, like, literally they interviewed Dean Cundy, Tommy Lee Wallace, Daniel Farrands, Kevin Williamson, David Thwaites, Richard Curtis, Larry Ratner. I mean, all people were there were like intimately involved with these productions, so I think that's just really cool that they get to. It's funny though, because this Halloween 6 chapter starts with a quote from John Carpenter from Fangoria that says, "Before you start shooting, you need a script that makes sense, one that everyone is happy with. The script is everything." Obviously poking fun at the fact that this movie never had a solid script throughout its entire production. So, development on this Halloween film, they were working on it as soon as the other one was over. Because even though the box office was not as big as usual, it still made enough money that where it would like support the production of another film. But production quickly stalled in 1990 when Mustafa Akkad entered a serious problem with the rights because he no longer held them because they expired. So Akkad soon entered into a bidding war with John Carpenter to reclaim control of the franchise. Both men were backed by distributors hoping to acquire the next installment for their own studios. Akkad partnered with Bob and Harvey Weinstein of Miramax Films, while Carpenter sided with Robert Shaye's New Line Cinema. Both parties submitted deals, with Akkad and Miramax ultimately prevailing. It would say like that obviously took a while, and then production was set to begin in November of 1993 with director Gary Fleeter at the helm. And then it was Fleeter who brought on screenwriter Philip Rosenberg, who penned the script title Halloween 666: The Origin, which was the original title of this movie. But then Fleeter eventually departed over creative differences. And the only similarities from this script was the return of young Tommy Doyle. Rosenberg had envisioned Michael as being homeless and Loomis now hospitalized as a patient at Smith's Grove. It was actually rumored that Akkad threw this draft across the room upon first reading it. And after Scott Rosenberg was brought in to polish the script. It still failed to satisfy, which pushed the release date from 1993, not the release date, the start date, to 1994. I guess in 1994 they offered Quentin Tarantino the chance to write in Halloween 6, but he declined. And then they asked him to executive produce, which I think Tarantino declined again. But they after which he suggested they suggested filmmaker Scott Spiegel to direct the project, who was then best known for having co-written Evil Dead 2 with Sam Raimi. And Weinstein, I guess Bob, followed up on this suggestion in April by screening Spiegel's only directorial credit, 1989's Intruder, which, by the way, if you haven't seen Intruder, that's a wonderful slasher film that takes place in a grocery store. Very inventive, very cool. Definitely will make a future appearance on this podcast. And even though Weinstein was a huge fan of Scott Spiegel and wanted him to direct the movie, Mustafa Akkad was not impressed, and he offered him a chance to rewrite the Rosenberg script. But after reading the script, Spiegel deemed the material unsalvageable, even with a full rewrite. And after that, he left. Then this is pushing into late 1994. The Weinsteins hired filmmaker Matthew Patrick to direct Halloween 6, who in turn brought on cinematographer Billy Dixon. Patrick sought to take the film in a different direction, according to Mullins and McNeil. That saw the return of young Tommy, but Tommy was now an extremely paranoid hideaway in a custom-built safe room and a constant fear that Michael Myers one day return, which kind of reminds me of Laurie Strode's character in the newer ones. And then Patrick, I guess, began scouting locations and casting, but then disagreements between the Weinsteins and the Akkads killed this version of the film 2 weeks before cameras were set to roll. Patrick ultimately left the project, although Dixon remained on. Production was delayed again, this time until October, in order to give producers enough time to find a new screenplay, and this is when Akkad remembered Daniel Farrands, who he met several years ago and who actually had given him kind of a Halloween Bible, which was like a thing Farrands had made that was basically like a timeline of Halloween, and like all the relevant information. There were family trees, and there were also possible places the series could go next, just written down in there. Even though Akkad would initially pass, he would then give Farrands the job after many, many years of struggling to find the right script still. And Farrands' initial story charged that all of Haddonfield's citizens were members of a secret cult, presided over by the mysterious man in black from Halloween 5. And that every generation the cult chooses one family to bear the curse mark of Thorn, a demon spirit that delivered human sacrifices on Samhain. Which would reintroduce Tommy, and then I would pluck Terrence Wynn, a very, very minor character from the original Halloween, and make him a secondary villain as the Man in Black. And they were managed to get Loomis back, even though after Halloween 5 he definitely believed that he would never play it again. Pleasance is quoted in Fangoria saying, "In a sense, I was relieved because I felt Halloween 5 had taken a totally absurd turn and that had lost a lot of what the previous Halloween movies had fought hard to create, which was a real sense of terror and suspense. But then I was notified about 6 months ago they were doing another one, and I got excited about it. The script is good, was it? So here I am. I'm enjoying playing Loomis again, and I will certainly be back for the next Halloween if they want me, even though unfortunately he would not, because he would die during the making of this film." Mullins and McNeil go on to say that it was producer Paul Freeman who found director Joe Chapelle, who was a rising star, uh, and who had recently directed 1994's Thieves Quartet, which was like a crime caper type thing. And this was where Joe Chapelle grew very close to the Weinsteins, and they would rehire him to direct 1998's Phantoms and 2000's Takedown, both for Dimension Films. Chapelle told Fangoria, actually, that the good thing is that expectations for this movie, Halloween 6, are not going to be very high. People are going to expect the worst. After Halloween 5, it can only get better. I'm not sure about that. Not sure that's a great attitude to have going in. He said he thought we were going to surprise a lot of people because they aren't going to expect anything more than what the title suggests. But it wouldn't be too long before, according to our authors, that the production would soon split into warring camps, the Weinsteins and the Accads, with Joe Chapelle firmly in the Weinsteins camp, but Farrands and producer Fall Freeman siding with the Accads. And the Weinsteins, I guess, forcibly seized control of the project after it had been filmed to oversee their own version, and they would re-edit and reshoot much of the film into what we know today as the theatrical cut. Their goal was to produce a better version of Halloween 6, though how successful they were remains a much debated topic, obviously. Sadly, neither version of the sequel reflects Farrands' original vision for the project, although the producer's cut strays far less than its theatrical counterpart. The screenwriter Daniel Farrands was forced to pen no less than 10 different drafts of this screenplay, not counting the theatrical re-rates by Joe Chapelle. Daniel Farrands is actually quoted as saying, in an interview with 73 Miles to Haddonfield, maybe that's the title of an article, it was like seeing my childhood dream turned into a living nightmare. I had no control. I was forced to stand by as producers took their hand to the script and cut out everything that was scary and suspenseful. And it goes on to note like what's different about the producer's cut, how there's like a lot more Loomis, a lot more stuff with runes. I guess at one point Paul Rudd stops Michael by throwing down runes in front of him. There's a lot more Loomis. There's a lot more Loomis with Wynn. I think they flesh out the whole plot point of, oh, Danny is gonna be the next Michael Myers. Like they have to transfer the curse to him, and that's why he's hearing these voices like Michael did when he was a child. Apparently, is because they're going to take Danny, and after Michael completes his curse and kills the last of his bloodline, they're going to transfer the curse to Danny, and Danny is going to kill Kara, and it's going to start all over again. Even though that doesn't necessarily make sense because Michael had already at that point killed all of Danny's family, including his grandmother, grandfather, and uncle. So like I don't know how long Danny would be able to bear that curse if he has to kill the people that are related to him, because there's going to be none left. But I guess that was all fleshed out. And I guess just a lot of like script stuff that like fixed continuity and like logic. I guess in the producer's cut, which was like the original version of the movie before the Weinsteins got a hold of it, Loomis and Paul Rudd are actually kidnapped by the cult and they're all taken to the facility, which again fixes one of the huge problems. And the reason they wanted to recruit Loomis was not to take over the cult necessarily, but to serve as like a guide and protector for Michael and then for Danny as he went through this transformation. And our authors go on to say that this movie, if nothing else, contains a slew of rich characterizations, some of the best in the franchise, with Tommy Doyle functioning as a nice young Van Helsing type in the tradition of Dr. Loomis, almost like a passing the torch kind of thing. And it's clear, it's like very clear, even in whatever version you watch, that he kind of never recovered from his encounter with the Shape, and the trauma is still there, and the experience now defines him as an adult. And Tommy's inclusion here definitely helps to like cement a strong connection to Carpenter's original. and it helps to include like a likable young male protagonist. Is a point that Mullins and McNeil make, because they've either been like totally like clueless idiots like Bob, or Jimmy and Bud from part 2, or annoying like Mike in part 4, or just outright jerks like Brady, or like Mike from part 5, sorry, or like jerks like Brady from part 4 and Spitz from part 5. And then this movie also, I guess they just go on to highlight what's good. The sinister Dr. Wynn gives this movie a secondary villain. Um, and while Wynn was technically charged at Smith Grove with protecting society from Michael, he and his colleagues actually done the exact opposite. And this actually, they bring up a good point. That's like, this leads us to question whether we know like what we thought we knew. Like, for example, like, did Michael actually escape in 1978, or did Wynn set him free? And the Cult of Thorn, were they like wanting him to go out and kill Laurie? And they go on to say that another strong addition is the new heroine Kara Strode, and that she breaks the mold we've grown accustomed to in this franchise and a lot of horror franchises at the time, because she is not a virginal teenage babysitter. She is a single mother in college, just trying to protect her family, which is definitely very interesting. And Jason Goes to Hell in 1994's New Nightmare, which were also kind of in this vein as well. Yeah, and then going to talk about how actually in the producer's cut, Michael is established as the father of Jamie's baby. But of course, I think they cut that out, which I think that was probably a good move, because that's kind of disgusting. Because Jamie is 16 or so in this movie, and Michael is her uncle. And whether he did that like on the urgings of the cult, or whether that was what he's been after with Jamie the whole time, is left unclear. And I find it very disturbing, of course, and so do our authors here, that this is what they intended for Michael, and I'm very glad that was cut. They also bring up the point that like Jamie has suffered one of the most unforgiving journeys of all time, because like if you think about it, I mean, she was young, she was orphaned at a young age. She was hunted by her serial killer uncle, and even briefly like possessed by him and forced to attempt to murder her foster mother. Jamie is hospitalized and loses the ability to speak. And then in the following years, she finds herself suffering from debilitating nightmare and panic attacks before her uncle reappears to murder her dog and foster sister and friend Tina, before being kidnapped and held captive for 6 years, during which she is raped by her uncle and impregnated, forced to give birth to a child in an underground prison, and then her uncle follows her and stabs her. And then I guess actually in the producer's cut, she survives the stabbing and is later shot in the head by Wynn. That is a bleak life. And another thing that interesting that they say is that there, I guess, was an interesting studio note where someone who worked for Miramax wanted, and this was before the creation of the Blankenship character, suggested that Tommy visit Michael's ailing mother in a rest home. And she would have been an invalid. She would have relayed clues about Michael's connection to Thorn, leading the audience to believe she may have been part of the cult. Before this is confirmed when she tries to stab Tommy. So I thought that would have been an interesting through line if they had put that in the movie. I think one of the biggest, I don't know, I think definitely like the biggest, like one of the biggest mysteries of this franchise that no movie has ever tried to explain is like what happened to Michael's, and like I guess in this timeline Laurie's Michael's sister, like what happened to their parents? Like I know that they passed away according to what is said in Halloween 2. But just like that, they never explain why. Because I mean, they couldn't have been that old. What exactly happened to them is never. And even in Halloween, like the newer ones, where Laurie's not his sister, that's not explained. Because even they would still probably be alive, maybe. Or even in like H2O or Resurrection, like what happened to Michael's parents? Like no one ever really touches on that in any of them. I mean, I guess, and that's not to give Rob Zombie's movies praise or anything, but I think that is one thing that I really, really kind of like about those movies. It's got to be probably the only single thing I like about those movies is that, like, in those movies, like, we see what happens to Laurie Strode's parents, because Michael comes and he murders Laurie Strode's parents right away, very violently, because he's just like, oh, that's my sister, and you're getting in the way of me killing my sister, I'm going to take you out. Like, literally, Laurie Strode's parents are not mentioned. They're not even seen in Halloween. Like, Laurie's mother is never seen in Halloween. And I know we're talking about Michael's folks, because, like, oh, first of all, in Rob Zombies, if you haven't seen him, Michael's father is not in the picture. Michael murders his stepfather, sister, and then sister's boyfriend. And then after Michael goes into, like, the psychiatric facility, Michael's mother kills himself. So there's Michael's parents gone. And then he murders Laurie Strode's adoptive parents. Like, Laurie Strode's parents and then also Michael's parents, big mystery. No idea what happens to them. They're largely absent, which I guess in the first one or first two I can kind of understand. But to not explain what happened to them in a long-term way is kind of a big thing for me. I think the book here goes on to talk about how they did a test screening in 1995 in New York City to gauge how audiences received the film, and by all accounts, the screening was a bust. The test audience hated the film, particularly the cult storyline and the entire ending. And the Weinstein would use this feedback as justification to seize control and cut the cult stuff. But when they cut the cult stuff and they added nothing else in return, it kind of made the movie flop. And like after this, they would basically axe like Weinstein stayed in control. After this test screening, they like basically fired Malika Akkad, Mustafa Akkad, producer Paul Freeman, and cinematographer Billy Dixon. And then Chapelle recast The Shape with stuntman Michael Lerner. And it goes on to talk about, like I said earlier, how the Weinsteins were doing something very similar at the time to Hellraiser Bloodline. How after the film was shot, they strongly disliked what they saw and demanded extensive changes that included more Pinhead, more gore, and a restructuring of the narrative, which cut the runtime of Hellraiser Bloodline down by like 20 minutes, I think. I think that movie's only like an hour and 22 minutes or something. And that resulted in, like I said, Kevin Yeager not wanting credit on that movie. It says that in the theatrical edition, Wynn teases that Jamie's baby has been genetically engineered to continue Michael's evil, and invites his old friend to join him. So I guess that's also what the fetuses are about. It's just that like they've like again, like in the theatrical edition, it's so unclear as to whether Danny's supposed to take up the mantle of like the murderer and like the Curse of Thorn, or if it's supposed to be the baby. That's left very, very ambiguous. I guess they were supposed to feature a scene in which Tommy, after beating Michael within an inch of his life, hoists him up by chains. And they're basically like tying him up and immobilize him, but in order to save time. the filmmakers instead just like haphazardly tossed Michael's mask onto the floor and shot a pan down reveal and called it a day. Much to Daniel Farrands' chagrin. And then go on to talk about how Chapelle would basically cut all of Loomis and Wynn's stuff, and how when Loomis and Wynn show up at like the site of Jamie's death, it was supposed to be like a several minute scene, but it was cut down to less than a minute. I guess director Joe Chapelle has shunned the franchise in the years, and he has turned down every single interview request from magazines, books, and documentaries, and he's declined participation in anniversary screenings, convention reunions, and home video supplements, which further shrouds Halloween 6 in mystery. Our authors go on to say that initially, again, a lot of great tidbits of information. I know it seems like I'm reading a lot, but like really, I'm not even scratching the surface of what these guys have to say and what they found out about these movies. They're much better researchers, much more equipped researchers than I. They talk about how one of the screenwriter's earliest intentions was to conclude the Jamie Lloyd storyline in a more satisfying manner. In that she would survive the opening and be hospitalized, like she was in the producer's cut, but that the shape would have followed her to the hospital, Michael Myers, only to find that she had escaped and stuffed her bed with pillows, and then Jamie would later appear at the end at Smith's Grove to take on the cult, and badly wounded, she would have confronted the shape and allowed for Tommy, Kara, and the children to get away, sacrificing herself to protect her newborn baby. And I think even the theatrical edition kind of gets this better, because according to this book in the producer's cut, Jamie was initially supposed to survive and then just kind of be passively put down by Wynn later in the hospital, whereas she dies protecting her baby in theatrical, which I think is kind of, it's not doing her right, but it's closer than that. And some initial drafts, I guess, depicted Dr. Wynn as being like far more evil and sinister, and initially he had like a physical connection to the shape, much like Jamie. And I guess there was supposed to be a scene where Wynn says to Loomis, he moves when I tell him to, acts on my impulses, feels what I feels. And then Wynn demonstrates this connection by cutting his own hand, which injures the shape's hand as well. And that he would have next demonstrated his absolute control over Michael by throwing his own secretary into Michael's cage and ordering Michael to kill her, which he does, to the horror of Loomis. So even though that wouldn't have made any sense at all, I think it might have been pretty cool to see visually. And according to this, and another big difference from the producer's cut, is that Loomis offers his own life as a diversion, much like Jamie might have in that earlier draft, so that Tommy, Kara, and the baby and the children can get away. He says to Michael, "Let it be over, Michael. Take me. Let me be your final sacrifice." And then he slashes Loomis across the chest, even though we know that doesn't keep old Loomy down, and he throws him through a window. And that Tommy and Kara escape through the burning room with Jamie's baby, pursued by the shape who was literally on fire. It doesn't much seem to mind, kind of just like Halloween 2. But again, that never came to fruition. Another alternate ending was, and this was Daniel Farrands' personal favorite, would have mirrored the film's opening, where Tommy, Kara, and the children escape Smith's Grove and arrive at the same bus depot where Jamie went the previous night. Its lobby is again empty, and Kara takes the children to the restroom while Tommy searches for help. Upon hearing a blood-curdling scream, he would have rushed downstairs to find Kara stabbed to death. A giant thorn symbol painted above her in fresh blood, and the script read, I guess, "Danny stands looking down at his mother with the darkest eyes we've ever seen, the devil's eyes. His hands are covered in blood, a cold gust of wind blows through the open window, the baby is gone." So, like, imagine how chilling and eerie that would have been if they had filmed that. Truly crazy. And again, there's an interview with Daniel Farrands where they discuss the trouble of production, all the rewrites, and how Daniel Farrands and Mustafa Akkad and like Paul Rudd and Marianne Hagen basically kind of teamed up and tried to like save this movie. And it's just all very interesting to read about. Daniel Farrands, he has like a very good attitude about it now, and the authors note that, considering the fact that they like butchered this guy's like pride and joy, this movie. So again, I know I've said it enough, but really, I think if you guys are a fan of this podcast, like these episodes anyway, in the Halloween franchise, I would definitely take out. I would definitely get your hands on this book. I think it's a nice companion piece. But anyway, now we'll get to what we've all been waiting for, which is seeing where this movie ranks in regard to the rest of the movies. I mean, you know, if we look at the Collider article that we've been referencing this whole time, by Vinnie Mancuso, where does Halloween 6 come in? It looks like it ranks higher than Part 5, but still comes in at number 11 out of 13. With Mancuso saying that the fact that the film can contain the credit in introducing Paul Rudd and still be this unpleasant is a crime more heinous than anything Michael has ever done. So Mancuso is not a fan of this Part 6, ranking Halloween 2 Rob Zombie's version, Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, Halloween Ends, Halloween 2, Halloween Kills, Halloween 2018, Part 4, Part 3, H2O, and the original all above it. So definitely very low for Mr. Mancuso. According to Sam Murian, for Parade, Part 6 beats out Halloween Kills. Interesting take. Halloween 5 makes sense. Halloween Resurrection, I take issue with that. Before coming in at number 10. And according to the Den of Geek article that I've already mentioned to you guys before, by David Crow and Don Kay, Part 6 is dead last, coming in at number 12. Yet there is saying that there isn't a Halloween movie as stupid as The Curse of Michael Myers, calling a messy, incoherent jumble of slasher cliches that commits the cardinal sin of Halloween, which is explaining why Michael is evil, which I don't think is necessarily the cardinal sin. I don't think it's that bad, but I think the explanation itself is, in fact, ludicrously dumb, quote unquote, which I will agree with. So like where it ranks in my personal rankings is a little higher than these guys, but not necessarily by much. If I can pull it up really quick here. Gonna vamp. Skidaboo, boo, 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 da, boo, doo, 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 doo. Got it. Okay. So again, we know that Halloween 5, because I don't include in my rankings the Rob Zombie ones because I think they're so abysmal, and I haven't included Halloween Ends because I want to get another crack at it before I cement its place in these rankings. So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that I have in this list, it comes in at number 9, beating Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. But again, these movies are the ones that I love. That's why they're on this list. So even though it's coming in pretty low, it doesn't mean I don't really like it. It just means that I just enjoy the other ones more. With my final ranking, I'll reiterate my final rankings here. Coming in at number 10, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Coming in at number 10, dead last is no Halloween 5, with The Curse of Michael Myers, the film we've just been talking about for all this time, beating it at number 9, with Halloween Kills coming in right above that at number 8, number 7, Halloween Resurrection, number 6, H2O, Number 5, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Number 4, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Because again, Halloween 4 is universally considered the 4th best Halloween film, it seems. With Halloween 2018 coming in at number 3. And then our boy Halloween 2 coming in at number 2. And then, of course, the original coming in at number 1. So again, I think this movie, despite being maligned by all, I think definitely has like a strong following among fans. Particularly the producer's cut, which I recommend you get your hands on. I will try to do the same. So let's talk Michael Myers actors here really quick. Again, this is George P. Wilbur. Again, so where does he rank? He ranks pretty in the middle of the road. Remember, according to that Collider article, which I'll post all these articles in the show notes. George P. Wilbur comes in at number 5, beating out Brad Laurie in Halloween Resurrection, Don Shanks in Halloween 5, and Chris Durand in Halloween H2O. Getting beat by Tyler Mane in Rob Zombie's Halloweens, Dick Warlock in Halloween 2, James Jude Courtney in these Halloween David Gordon Greens, and Nick Castle in the original. Even though I definitely would say, like I said earlier, that I think George P. Wilbur does a way better job in this one than he did in Halloween 4. Because I think he just had not more screen time, but I think more focus, because I think every time he's shown on screen, the shot is directly on him, and he gets to do a lot more of like the walk and a lot more, I think, actiony, stabby kind of stuff. According to Screen Rant, our boy George Wilbur ranks in, again, middle of the pack, comes in 4th out of 9, beating this time Tyler Mane, but of course Don Shanks, Michael Lerner, even though he was only in a couple of scenes in Halloween 6, Brad Laurie, and Chris Durand from H2O. Chris Durand and Brad Laurie are definitely, like, even fans consider them to be Mad Michael Myers. And then according to the Nerd Stash, George Wilbur comes in again, middle of the pack at number 5, beating out Chris Durand, Don Shanks, and Brad Laurie. So as far as the mask for Halloween 6 goes, according to Screen Rant, I think it comes in kind of middle of the pack. Or no. Yeah, this mask comes in pretty middle of the pack. Because again, there's been some really, really abysmal masks. And I think personally that this one is one of the better ones. For sure. Like, sure, it doesn't hold a candle to like the original mask from the first one and then the second one. But I think it definitely is better than like 4, 5, the Rob Zombies, and then like H2O and Resurrection, certainly. I think aside from these new movies, which recreate the original mask very well, and the original, it's definitely the best. But according to this article, according to this Screen Rant article, the only masks better are Halloween 1, Halloween 2, and Halloween 2018. And according to Collider, Halloween 1, Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's first Halloween, H2O, which is absolutely cap. The Curse of Michael Myers comes in at number 5. Let me read this. What is this H2O? Literally, they love. I guess this mask was made by Stan Winston, so I love that. Because you get to see Michael's eyes, but again, we don't want to see Michael's eyes. The fact that his eyes kind of humanizes him, and that's not necessarily what we're all a fan of. Anyway, can't agree with you there, Screen Rant. But according to Stack.com, of course, Halloween and Halloween 2018 beat out our Halloween 6 mask, and then Zombies Halloween does as well. And then Halloween 2, but then, hey, at number 6, Halloween the Curse of Michael Myers mask comes in, beating the mask from Halloween 2, Halloween 5, Halloween 4, H2O, and Resurrection. So again, I'll post these articles, the links to the articles in the show notes, so you can look it up for yourselves, and I hope you'd enjoyed me kind of telling you what they say, so you might as well not even read them. But anyway, I think that that draws this episode and therefore this season to a close. Again, Halloween 6, I mean, a lot to like. It's kind of slapdash, obviously, kind of schlocky. The way it was obviously rewritten, and the script was a sort of a Frankenstein, and kind of changed as the movie went along, and there was struggle and control. But when you look at it at the end of the day, I mean, it has the stuff you love about these movies, which is graphic kills, high pace, decent acting, actors and actresses that are nice to look at. I mean, Loomis is there. Michael is there, looking the best he has in a couple movies. Great mask. Wilbur is really kind of dialing it in this one as opposed to the fourth one. And, I mean, whether you're a fan of this or not, I think them kind of taking chances and taking leaps with the explanation for why Michael kills is very interesting, and it makes for a different sort of plot, a different sort of story than the other ones. And I think it's definitely a movie that I will rewatch over and over and over again until the end of time. And I can only hope that I have in some way changed your opinion of this movie and all of these movies within this Thorn Trilogy subset of the Halloween series. And again, all of these will be released on Halloween. Hopefully I'll be able to get these out to you guys tonight. And I just hope that you have enjoyed listening to me talk about them. And I hope that the information I've shared with you today has raised your esteem for these movies and affects in a positive way the way you watch them and view them. And I just appreciate you giving me your time and energy and listening. We'll be back with more content to come, because again, this does not cost me really any money to do, only time, and it's something I enjoy doing very much. So if you want to listen, I'll be here to talk. So until next time, thank you again, and I hope you guys have a pleasant evening, and I hope you have had a nice Halloween and a nice fall, and I will see you, I guess, when it starts to turn more wintry. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.